Well, hello and welcome as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. When we left Moses and Aaron yesterday, everybody was angry with them. Pharaoh was angry that they would tell him that God wants his people to go out to the wilderness to sacrifice and worship. The Hebrews, the Israelites, are angry with Moses and Aaron because Pharaoh has increased their workload because of that request. Well, today we're going to begin to see the power of God's hand against Pharaoh. In chapter 7, where our reading picks up today, the Lord sends Moses back to Pharaoh to repeat his request. God tells Moses that Pharaoh's heart will be hard and that it's going to take great wonders to finally move Pharaoh to obey God. And sure enough, when Moses and Aaron speak with Pharaoh again, Pharaoh is defiant. Moses commands Aaron to cast down his staff as God had told him to do, and Aaron's staff becomes a serpent. Well, Pharaoh's magicians do the same thing by their secret arts, only Aaron's staff, his snake, swallows up those of the magicians. Still, Pharaoh's not going to budge. So God sends Moses to meet Pharaoh as he's going down to the bank of the Nile River. And he tells Moses to tell Pharaoh that because he refuses to obey God, he will turn the river into blood. Moses then commands Aaron to stretch out his staff over the water, and all the waters turn to blood. Everyone had to dig wells to get drinkable water. But the magicians of Pharaoh are able to duplicate the turning of water into blood so that Pharaoh's heart remains hard. 7 days later, God tells Moses and Aaron to go before Pharaoh again and to tell him that if he continues to refuse to let God's people go, there will be a plague of frogs that will come up from the waters and they'll be everywhere and they'll get into everything. Pharaoh's magicians duplicate this as well. But still, Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said that if God would take away those frogs, he would let them go worship. Moses even let Pharaoh set the time for the relief from the frogs would take place. And at that time, the frogs all died. And now there were piles of stinking frogs everywhere. But Pharaoh reneged on his promise, and he wouldn't let the people go. The next plague was gnats. God told Moses to have Aaron stretch out his staff and to strike the dust of the earth, which became gnats that covered the whole land. This the magicians of Pharaoh could not do, and they told Pharaoh that this was the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart, well, it remained hard. God then tells Moses to return to Pharaoh again and to tell him that if he won't let God's people go, God will send swarms of flies over the land, except that the land of Goshen, where God's people live, will not be affected. So the flies came and they ruined everything. So Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron and told them to worship and sacrifice to their God in the land. They told Pharaoh that they couldn't do that the sacrifices must be offered in the wilderness. Pharaoh gave permission as long as they didn't go too far and as long as Moses prayed for relief from the flies. Well, God removed the flies the next day as Moses had told Pharaoh he would. And once again, Pharaoh reneges on his promise and he won't let the people go. So the Lord sends Moses to Pharaoh again to tell them that if he doesn't let God's people go, there will be a terrible plague on the livestock in Egypt the very next day, except again, not in the land of Goshen. And indeed, the next day, all the livestock of the Egyptians dies, but none of the livestock of Israel dies or is even harmed. Still, Pharaoh won't let the people go. So next, God tells Moses to take handfuls of soot and to throw them into the air in the sight of Pharaoh, and that boils would break out on both man and beast. And those boils were so bad, the magicians couldn't even stand before Moses. Still, Pharaoh's heart remained hard, and he wouldn't listen to the Lord. The seventh plague, a plague of hail, ends our reading for today. Once again, God sends Moses and Aaron to Pharaoh to give Pharaoh a chance to obey God and to let the people go. And once again, Pharaoh refuses. God actually gives a very explicit warning on this particular plague through Moses about the hail that was going to come and when it was going to come, and that they should bring all their slaves and livestock in from the fields to protect them. Some of the Egyptians feared the Lord, believed Moses, and did so. Others did not fear the Lord, and they did nothing. At the appointed time, God told Moses to stretch out his hand toward heaven, and a great hailstorm destroyed all that was out in the fields. Once again, the land of Goshen was left untouched. So Pharaoh sends for Moses and Aaron. He admits that he has sinned. He pleads with them to pray to God to end the storm, which they do. Yet again, when the storm has ceased, Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and he will not let his people go. So that ends our reading for today. Tomorrow we'll be back, and we'll look at the last 3 plagues. May God be with you and bless you as you continue your day, and I look forward to being with you again tomorrow.